It is hump day and we are live. How is everybody on this Wednesday? Thumbs up? Awesome. We have with us somebody who's going to help us on a topic that I know a lot of entrepreneurs that I support certainly struggle with, which is hiring people in today's environment. And we are lucky enough to have Meg Baker here, who is, I'm going to get you an official story here, and then we'll talk chit chat like we always do. So, Meg is the founder of Meg K and Co, which is a hiring agency for conscientious online business owners. She's created the company to empower online entrepreneurs with socially conscious hiring practices that propel their business forward. And she's also passionate about social justice and brings this lens to her company's hiring processes. So I love this for 1,000 reasons, and I'm going to have an equal number of questions, but welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Pam. I'm really excited to be here.
So let's tell everybody whereabouts you are in the world today.
Yeah, I'm based out of Chicago, Illinois.
And is it snowing yet on October 27th?
No, it is not. It is not snowing yet. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri originally, which is a little bit warmer, but now I live here. It's cold in the winter, but overall, it's a pretty nice place to live.
Oh, cool. I love it. I've
Yes.
heard wonderful things about it. My daughter looked at Northwestern for one of her schools, and I went there probably 100 or say 25 years ago, and loved it. One of my very best pork chop that I've ever eaten is in Chicago at Harry Carey's.
Yep.
It was just a perfectly cooked, salted pork chop in the middle of a plate, no bone. I'm like, oh my God, this is heaven. Now, granted, I'm a pork chop freak, but that's my first memory of Chicago every time I think of it.
Yes.
So, hiring, right? I have a
Mhm.
ton of clients who look to hire, and just starting at the very top, finding hiring recruiters who get this entrepreneur world
Mhm.
is hard, right? So I came out of corporate. I know what recruiting is. I know what a retained recruiter is. I know what whatever they call it, commissioned recruiter is. I know the difference. I know they're going to call me when I'm in a job because they want me to use them, and they're not going to talk to me when I'm out of a job because I'm no use to them unless somebody's asking for exactly my skill set. And it's a very traditional model, and it's all corporate-y.
Mhm.
And when my clients have struggled to hire, I've wanted to have recruiters to reach out to who get this space, this
Mhm.
online space. And you're one of those people. So tell me how you came to play in this space, how long you've been at it, and kind of what makes you different than, not you in particular, but what you do different than those other recruiters.
Yeah, that's great. I have a lot to share. So you
Yay!
in the invite it said bring something to the campfire that like tells a story about you. So this is me and my mom.
Ah!
About 5 years ago, oh my gosh, like 5.5 years ago when I got married. Kind of a sad story though. Shortly thereafter, about 5 years ago, around this time, she passed away.
Oh,
And I was a teacher, and I with in a public charter school in St. Louis, and with my grief, I just couldn't really handle the demands of being in that position anymore. And it felt like a really aligned job when I was in it. I was speaking, it was a French immersion school. I was speaking
oh,
French,
cool.
which I love, English. I was, working with a population of kids that I really care about, students of color. And yeah, it seemed like a dream job, but I got to the point where I couldn't handle my grief on top of it. So that's kind of when I got into the foray of going online. And I started my first brand called Meg K, the VA. That's why I still have K, because it rhymes with VA. It's my middle name,
It
Kathleen.
works.
It does work. And then my husband moved us to Chicago too. So my mom's passing and then our moving here was definitely the impetus for me going online. And really, my goal was to make money online, but still have like a relatively fulfilling and sustainable life so that I could take care of myself and grieve and hopefully make a difference too. Because I
Mm-hmm.
felt like in my school, I didn't have the resources to make a difference, even though I
Ah,
was working with a population that I'm really passionate about. The Black Lives Matter movement started in St. Louis in 2014 when I was teaching kids. About half of them were Black kids, and just seeing these kids, knowing that they'd be more likely to get to have like state sanctioned police violence made me really sad.
Mm-hmm.
But there wasn't really a whole lot. I wasn't resourced enough to really do much about it. So I went online. I ended up being a VA for quite a few folks, but I saw a disconnect and a gap. People were hiring me because I was this nice, pretty lady who was referred to them, but they didn't really know the role that they needed, and I like was not a good VA. I have ADHD. I'm
I
a much
love
better,
that. I
yeah,
love that honesty.
yeah, I wasn't. I'm a much better CEO. I'm a great manager and leader and visionary of my people, but I was pretty not a good VA.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So then I dabbled in some project management and ended up replacing myself as a project manager in one of my friends' companies because I was pregnant and I also knew I didn't want to do this forever.
Got it.
So I thought it was going to be a maternity leave, but I'm like, oh no, this is permanent. I can't be working like this. And then that goes to the whole contractor employee thing. I was almost working as an employee, but as a
Ah,
contractor, and that's
got
not,
it.
the IRS is catching up to our shenanigans on the
Yes,
internet.
they are. That's an important, it's something important. I just took another client through it today. I said, you don't want to play this close to the edge
Nope.
anymore.
Nope. 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 So
Yep.
anyway, that's kind of how I got into it. I also got one of my first hiring clients by yelling at them on the street. They're an Instagram famous person. We lived in the same neighborhood on the north side of Chicago. He had hired me to like be an integrator, but I was like, and I was also pregnant. I'm like, I can't be on your team long term. Like, I don't want to do this. But I ended up hiring him a couple of employees, and that's kind of when I got into it. So I
Okay.
really, yeah. So I do not have the experience that you do, Pam, of all the recruiters, but I kind of just fell into it, into this space, and really using what I know about social justice, critical race theory, what I know about like education and leadership and assessment. And I've just kind of created this process, this kind of
Love it.
hiring funnel that I just think everyone should do in their
I love
companies.
it.
Yeah.
See,
So
so I love this like for so many reasons. And I like there are about 8 topics I want to circle back to you on. But the first thing you said is a hiring funnel. So right there, you distinguish yourself from every kind of corporate recruiter that ever was. It's like, okay, you're speaking my language. That
mhm,
tells me you know you've got a network or a process for identifying candidates.
yep.
You've got a process for helping me identify what I want to hire.
Bingo.
You've got a process for helping me decide if they should be a contractor or an employee.
Yep.
You've got a process for narrowing down the recruits, how to do the interviews.
Mhm.
Once I hire them, what to do with them to onboard them. And so you've created that gap that you identified. I see in so many businesses as they go to scale. So, yay, number one. So let's kind of start at the top of the funnel.
Okay.
How do you identify? I mean, I don't want all your trade secrets, but like in working with a client, how do you help them? What do they need to do to help you get the top of the funnel to pull in the right, magnetize the right people?
It's a lot of good critical questions to ask. So we
Got it.
do baseline questions, but I've trained my two employees. We kind of do it together. We're very collaborative, but I need many minds and many
Mm-hmm.
different points of view. That's also why doing this is good because you want diversity,
Yep.
not just racially, but in a lot of different ways. So you get those
Mm-hmm.
different points of view. I'm like way better. My client experience is so much better having gone through my own
Yep.
process a couple times. But anyway, it's about asking the right questions so that we can identify what the gap is. And some folks already have an org chart, and that's great. We can help fill that next role, or we can help identify what that role is. And that's
What should it be? Yep.
mhm. And
Love
that's
it.
why I like working with micro businesses that are in the like 6 to 7, and usually what they think they need isn't what they actually need. So we kind of build out the roles and responsibilities, and then we create the job ad. So that's really the top of funnel for
Got
people
it.
to opt in or opt out. But this is where we also really consult and push our clients to be very clear about what their values and what their mission is. Because that's the beginning of getting buy-in, and getting buy-in from your team. That's what's going to make management easier, and that's what's going to make retention easier. So some people are very uncomfortable being like, oh yeah, I actually do believe in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and, really kind of drawing the line in the sand.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that's really important. So that's kind of the top of funnel. And then we build the rest of the funnel based on what do we need to know and like what do we need to measure, and kind of thinking about the profile without getting into like demographics or like the avatar. That's where we can get into sticky, like weird biases and just like cloning ourselves. And that's not great.
Which happens naturally if you don't pay attention, right?
Mhm.
That's one thing I wanted to point out. So I don't think necessarily in the hiring practice people are, hey, I want to exclude people, but our natural bias is going to be unmanaged. Our natural bias is going to be to clone
Mhm.
ourselves. I just want
Mhm.
to kind of point that out, but keep going.
Right, and it's not malicious, the intent isn't, but the impact is
Is.
bad.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
that's kind of one of my big values is like this accountability, and for me to set a high standard for folks, especially other white business owners, um, to just be really reflective and, even if we don't mean to, that doesn't really matter. The intent
Mm-hmm.
doesn't really matter. It's the impact that
Mm-hmm.
matters. So going back to the hiring funnel, then what we do is we build our application, and it's very objective with a lot of questions. And then our technique with this application model is to get it in front of as many people as we can. I have a network of folks that know to sign up for my list in order to see the job postings I have. They know I work with really amazing, conscientious online business owners. And I really have to help these business owners step into what makes them so unique and so wonderful, especially in a market that's really competitive right now, where
Mm-hmm.
candidates are kind of interviewing you more than
One of
you're
my was
interviewing
one of
them.
my questions is the changing nature of the interview process.
Yep, yep. So we do an incredibly objective application, and where I have to challenge people sometimes is like, you're not going to be wowed by anyone necessarily or fall in love. Like, this is not like dating, actually. That's incredibly problematic, actually. So, and we have to tell our clients that, like, listen, like, we're not looking for romance, but we need to objectively see who the best candidates are. And then Rachel, who's my hiring strategist, who I used to do all the roles in my business,
Wow.
but then
Yep.
Rachel does an initial interview so that we can measure those other kind of more human components that aren't necessarily just on the checkbox. So we go
Love it.
for very tangible things in the application, but then looking for those other things in the interview. We have an initial conversation, and then we let our candidate, or excuse me, we have our clients then listen to like Rachel's feedback, and watch those interviews, and then we choose a handful to do a paid performance
Love it.
assessment.
Love, 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 love it.
So like, do I know what I'm doing? Not really, but like I found a gap in the market, and I use critical thinking and what I know about education and what I know about assessment.
And what's
And
important to you socially.
mhm,
Yeah.
mhm,
So to hit on the hot live wire, right? That recently, unfortunately, only recently, have a lot of white people and business owners, myself included, come to recognize that in our more traditional ways of thinking, despite the fact that we, thought, oh, well, I'm not racist, there were a number of things in my thought processes that were entirely racist. And I've done a lot of
mhm,
reading and have come to learn one thing, which is I will never get it right, but
mm-mm,
I can continue to take feedback and input and things that I learn and put them to the test. As my daughter, who's much more enlightened than I am, said at one point, there's no excuse. That's no excuse. Just be better.
mhm.
Be better. It's like I
Intent doesn't really
remember that
matter.
in
It's
my
the
head.
impact.
Be better. Yeah, because what you
Mhm,
think you're doing doesn't matter. What actually results from your actions is
mhm,
what matters.
mhm.
And so that insight, I think, is coming to a lot more people now, certainly in the entrepreneur space, but we don't know what to do with it, right? We
Right.
may not run in the circles where we would have exposure to all of this wonderful diversity. We
Mhm,
may think we're being totally objective about something, and there's some bias working in there that we don't even realize is working in there or do realize.
mhm.
So how do you help an entrepreneur, or do you work with entrepreneurs who aren't working on themselves with this? And if you do, how do you help them get to a better understanding?
That is such a great question. So I used to be really defensive about people who weren't fully woke as me,
Hmm.
which is also problematic
I hear you.
because part of my role as trying to do better is holding space for fellow white people to figure it out. So, where now part of my vetting process, what I used to just kind of be like, oh, yeah, people have heard me talk my truth on podcasts. Like they're probably anti racist if they come to me, but that's not actually true. So, in my I have not only do I have a lot of messaging and language around where I stand in my web copy, but in my questionnaire for folks to apply to work with us, I just ask the open-ended question like, what is your journey in anti-racism? To not put people on the defensive, but I need to see that there's some sort of awareness that like people are working on it,
Hmm.
and that
It's not just, I'm not a racist. Why are you asking me
exactly,
that? Okay,
exactly.
got it.
So, and I also I've decided, granted, now that I have employees that are doing like 85% of the client work, I have plenty of time to do one-on-ones, sales
Ah,
calls. So I
perfect.
vet people and I have those conversations with
Got it.
people. And then I also point people. So, like, disclaimer, I'm not a DEI expert. I am a very white privileged person who benefits from white supremacy extremely. And that's part of the reason why I've been kind of scared to come out here and be like, yep, this is what it is. But I
Hmm.
will say, while I do everything I know how to do, um, to hold myself accountable to have a really equitable hiring process, the work actually comes from listening to DEI educators, mainly BIPOC folks, that you pay money to, whose programs you do, or books, and it's a lifelong journey. And part of it too is putting your pride aside. I still get call-ins. I appreciate when people call me in and not call me out. And I try to do the same thing with my clients,
Oh, I
not
like that.
shame.
Call in instead of call out. I really like
Exactly.
that.
Exactly. But you know what? I will say some people get a little mad when like white celebrities are called out, but I think sometimes they deserve it too because
Yeah.
they've had plenty of call-ins
There you
and they
go.
have a lot of
That's
influence. So I don't feel that bad for them.
If you're not going to listen to the call in, it's going to be time for a call out. Yeah, I
Yep,
got you.
it's accountability, right? So
Yep.
I don't know if that answered your question, but that's part of
You
my
totally answered my question because, and the cool thing is your hiring practice then would also include some education. Hang on, my dogs are arguing with each other
hi,
right now.
sweeties. Oh,
They're
they're
just
beautiful.
the quiet one down there is mad that the big one decided to hover over my shoulder,
How rude.
and
My
he's going
dog's
to start
sleeping.
pawing me in just a minute. But so is that I get educated if I'm working with you, and I don't get educated by somebody who says I have the answers. I get educated by somebody who says, go out and talk to these BIPOC DEI providers
Hmm.
because that's
Hmm.
where you need to be to keep it going.
Yep.
And just these conversations help so much. So
Hmm.
I'm already put my to-do list item down, Pam. You need to step up here. You need to do more reading. You need to buy more of the books done by BIPOC DEI
Yep.
folks,
Hmm.
and you need to continuously think outside of the box when you're
Yeah.
thinking about. Now, here's the thing with me. So when I go to hire, I don't actually go to hire, or I've been blessed to not have to do that. Like somebody's walked into my life for some reason, and it's like, oh, this would be a great job for you. Were you interested?
Hmm.
And it's when they cross my life. So it's my job to make sure I'm running in diverse enough circles and not
Yep.
just race,
Hmm.
race.
Race is a big part of it. Race is a big part of it, but
Yeah,
there
it,
are other.
it is right now to me probably the biggest part
Mhm.
because that's the place that's been so brutally ignored. Um,
Yeah, I mean, the racial inequities in the whole hiring process is really super messed up.
yeah,
But like, and diversity just makes us better. Um,
that's what I'm thinking. So when I was back in corporate, I did have a lot of mini me's running around. There's no question at all. But since I've been in the entrepreneur world, by definition, putting even diversity and inclusion aside, I'm working with much younger people with a whole different perspective
I
on
love
life,
young people. I got
with
these
a different
Gen Z.
language than I have, with different everything. And on my team, I've got that is reflected because that's who my daughter was hanging with, and I happened to hire my daughter's friends. So in the conversations, I find it really refreshing to say, like, I already have in my mind, this is what we should do, but to throw something out there, what's your input? And to get it, and like all the different ideas that come to the table because they're so different from me that I never would have thought of. Like, the value of diversity itself, no matter how you define it, is critical. And recognizing that the inequality for people of color, any color, I think, but mostly, I mean, maybe I shouldn't be this definite, but
Mostly,
mostly
let's
Black.
say it, mostly Black people
Yeah.
in the United States,
Yeah.
1000%.
Yeah.
And the age thing, I love my like Gen Z millennial cusp employees. They keep me
Blow my mind.
on my toes. But on the flip side too, I've seen candidates that are older than me, and that I've seen people be like, oh, well, they like making assumptions about like their tech
Yeah.
abilities. And
Will
I'm
they
like,
get it?
stop
Yep.
it. You don't
Oh,
do
that
that.
goes back years. So, like I told you, I'm a baby boomer, and I totally remember me in my brash 20s going, that lady's 50. She's never going to understand this computer, which at the time, the computer happened to be as big as a room,
Yep,
in a room that you took cards to and fed it in. I'm like, they don't get that we can just go down and feed these cards in, and boom, we get the data. That's just happened for every generation.
But like, it really, having these narrow-minded viewpoints that people don't even know that they have.
Great point.
It
Great point.
not only
It would
is it an
exclude me
injustice,
for no reason in a
right,
particular
and
conversation.
not only is it an injustice to the people who are job seeking, but you're also shooting your own self in the damn
Yeah.
foot because it's bad business.
Right.
But mainly, my passion is mainly for justice and racial equity. But it's also shitty business. Excuse me.
Yeah.
When we don't take these things into account, and I used to position my services kind of as like matchmaking, but then I learned better. It's really about the process. And because sometimes people are going to be unreliable, or, they're humans, like something might happen, or like my school was counting on me to continue to teach the following year. And I was like, well, my mom passed away and I'm not going to do this anymore. So good luck to you guys. I was good at what I did. I was aligned, but things happen. But when you have the process that you can rinse and repeat, then operationally you're good. So, and I get some pushback sometimes on from my peers about how I position my services, of like, oh, but what's the transformation? But like, sometimes due diligence to me is what is sexy. Equitability and justice. I'm like, I cannot position this as like, your dreams are going to come true. Like, this is business. Like, after you hire people, you got to manage them. Like, it's not always the most romantic, idyllic thing, but like, it is important. And I believe in the process. I just really believe in the process. And I believe that the magic happens when that, when that aligned person comes, they're more likely to come. I can't make any guarantees, because there are many things that I cannot control in the universe, such as other human beings. But
you're addressing alignment in your hiring process. So your chances, two things you said, not dating, right? I will tell you, when I was in corporate, I hired like it was dating. If I liked you, I hit it off, and I thought you had a great work ethic, I figured I can teach you anything. So cool, you're on board. The key here is you're doing an objective assessment first, which is going to make sure there's alignment, make sure there's the skill set. And I often would ignore the skill set until they were on board. I went more for culture and alignment, and I didn't care as much about education as willingness to work and learn and get along and all those things.
And I don't think education and experience are necessarily that relevant either, to be honest. It's really about, do you have the skills? And this is why the whole critical process of beginning is really thinking about, what are the hard skills that we need, or what are some things that might be transferable, even if they don't have direct experience.
Bingo. Bingo.
And it's about, gosh, I love developing my employees. Like, they're wonderful. They have all of this like energy, and I hate to call them my minions, but like, and they're not mini me's, they're very different from me, but they believe in my mission and they just bring so much to the table, and
Mhm.
they really appreciate having a boss who pushes them and develops them. And
Right.
that's really a beautiful, like, what an opportunity we have as business owners in this space, that we need folks to do like many different jobs.
Mhm.
Whereas in bigger corporate things, you really need people to do more specific things.
Yep.
I think we really have this in our favor to recruit people, not just to do remote work, but to do meaningful work for companies they care about, and to be developed by bosses who care about them.
You just articulated something that I could not articulate in the 30 years I was in corporate in 2 sentences, and I'm glad
Stop
we're
it.
recording this.
I
Seriously
was
did.
nervous, Pam, because I'm like, this, you know so much more than I do
No,
about
you just
life.
articulated something I couldn't put in words. So the last 5 years of my career, I remember saying, as I was developing my teams inside corporate and getting frustrated at the corporate machine, there is a way to do business right.
Mhm.
And I knew how I led, and I knew how the bottom line worked, and I knew that my bosses were not connecting the two things. It was, we will do that as long as it's
Mhm.
profitable. We will do that as long as it's profitable. What I'm going to have to go back to this and take what you just said, clip it, copy it, and paste it on my wall, because you articulated it. And
I'm so
when
glad
they
this is being recorded.
yeah, oh, it is. It's absolutely YouTube. I can get it off YouTube anytime I
Great.
want. But once we turn around and look at our employees and say, what would I want in that situation? What do they want? They want to be doing valuable work. They want to be growing. They want to learn. They may want to be an entrepreneur. They may want to work inside your company forever. They may want different kinds of benefits than we ever traditionally had.
Mhm.
And let's adapt to that, because that's what you do.
Mhm. That's why we
And
all went into entrepreneurship. It's to listen to the
that's what,
market, and this is the job
bingo.
market.
And guess what? When you do that, there's transparency, there's honesty, there's
Mhm.
the ability for somebody to give you honest feedback because they're not worried they're going to lose their job. They're not,
Mhm.
all of that stuff. And by the way, what they contribute is freaking exponential. Like, it
Oh.
blows my mind every
Mhm.
day
Mhm.
what this team is willing to do to get things right, to make the mistakes, to learn from them, to
Mhm.
grow. And
Mhm.
I remember somebody saying to me once in corporate, well, what if you put all this money into training in them and they're great and they decide they want to go work somewhere else? And I said, that's awesome. What if
Mhm.
I'm working for them someday? That's even more awesome,
Mhm.
because I contributed to that
Yeah.
growth.
Yeah.
And as entrepreneurs, we're starting to get that,
Mhm.
doing business right. And with people like you in place to make sure we all stay on track with that, we're going to hire more and more and more of the right people.
Mhm.
That's going to grow like a really good cancer and knock out all of the old bad cells.
Mhm.
And, like
Mhm.
somebody said to me, the Fortune 500 and their hiring practices and their onboarding practices is like, are sipping sipping champagne on the Titanic.
I've worked with one company that has some pretty problematic hiring practices, and they didn't like any of my candidates, and I'm just like, "Go figure. Good luck, you guys."
Yep. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Awesome. So if you have time and you don't mind going, I know we're running a
Yep.
little
I
long,
got
but
time. I got time.
awesome. Talk to me about contractor versus employee. I think the
Yes.
landscape is changing, and I'd
Mhm.
love to know your insight.
Yeah, I wanna plug real quick my friend and referral partner. Her name's Kira LaForgia. She is an HR consultant. Her company is called The Paradigm Consulting, and I partner with her a lot. Once I hire people, she does the compliance. I actually did her intensive, and she helped me create my handbook. She helped me create she helped me, yeah, like my handbook, and then figure out what I needed to do HR wise to be compliant
Awesome.
with my policies. And she's really good at doing multi-state, which some folks are just like, what? But
I know. I'm definitely writing that number down because myself and clients often have need for
yeah,
that kind of help.
Kira is wonderful. And I actually, she also has a program called Set to Scale. That's it's a program where she has templates. Like, so once I hire for people, she's an amazing resource either with her intensive or in her Set to Scale program to get like the offer letters and then have support in managing the people. And then I actually coach in her program as well.
Love it.
Yeah, so she really has that HR background. She manages like 50 people in a different company in Southern California, along with having her
Oh, she
consulting
does it in
business.
California, where it's one of the hardest places to hire people.
Exactly. And California is on the cutting edge of legislation when it comes to labor laws, and yeah, so I really learned a lot from Kira about like this contractor versus employee, and really just how to do the logistics of it. And it does feel overwhelming at first, but like it's an investment, and like I it's been fully worth it for me, but I had to really buy into my vision and be like, there's no turning back, Megan. We're doing this. Let's go.
Yep.
But like, I
Yep.
couldn't afford contractors anymore. But anyway, I wanted to plug Kira because I've learned a lot about contractors and employees from her. But so essentially, according to the IRS, there's different ways to look at the relationship. And with anything legal, there can be some nuances and some gray areas. But really, what it comes down to is a contractor is supposed to come to you like pre trained. Like, you do not train a contractor, you onboard a
It's an
contractor.
important distinction I've
Yes.
never mentioned before, but that's a great point.
So and that's why you pay top dollar for them. They're also running their own companies and they have their own expenses. But like, I needed contract support because I was in the weeds. I needed folks who had HR experience. They cost me a lot more money, but I didn't have to train them. I merely
Mhm.
had to onboard them and how we did things in my company.
Got it.
And then really, they're not supposed to be a long-term fix. I think you can maybe get away with it. Like me, I'm a contractor, but like people aren't using me as like part of their team. Like, it's a
Yeah, I
per
consider
project
your role more a
basis.
consulting role than a contracting role.
It,
You're a 1099, but
right.
it's a
I am a
consulting role.
1099. Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. But I am a 1099, and we have our done for you hiring, but
right.
we're not in people's thing. The big distinction is if you are contracting someone who is doing what you are selling, that is not great. So like, I had contractors who were doing what I was selling, hiring services, but it was not a long-term fix. It was to plug the hole in the boat
Got
while I
it.
could get my head above water. And I think like marketing ongoing contract support is fine if you are not selling marketing services.
Got it. If
But
they're
like,
doing it their way, it's their expertise they're bringing
right,
to the table.
and you're not selling it. Like,
Right.
they're not like subcontracting really. But when it comes, so I think I can hire marketing agencies or contractors to help me, and that's fine. Personally, I want all that stuff in-house
Right.
because I want to do
Yep.
it my way.
There you go.
And then uh yeah, and contractors, you're working with an LLC. So you can't, I've been told before, like, you can, when I was hiring contractors, like, you can ask if it's an agency or if you're working with that person. Actually, I can't. If I'm working with a contractor, I could be working with anyone under
Mhm.
their LLC. I don't get a person, you get an
Right.
entity. Whereas with an employee, you get a
It's them.
person, you get
Yep.
a person. Is there an investment you have to make? Sure. Is there like bureaucratic stuff you have to do? Yeah, but you get to develop them. You get a
Right.
commitment. And yeah, you have to get your I-9, your W-4, get your workers' comp insurance, but it's like cool. And I felt like a long time that this wasn't something that was accessible to me, that I was, because I'm a woman entrepreneur or whatever, or because XYZ limiting beliefs,
Mhm.
that this wasn't for me, or that this was like too capitalistic and like too oppressive. But one of my mentors named Trudy LeBron, who I learned from, she actually has an equity centered coaching program, a certification that she's launching. But I was in a mastermind that she used to have. And we really worked on how to embody our values into our company. where was I going with this?
I think we're just generally talking about different, what are they? W-2,
Oh,
1099?
right. So I thought that, but once I learned from Trudy, there's a way that you can do business and business structures without actually being oppressive. Like white supremacy loves the binary. And it's okay to like be in this middle. Like I can still manage people. I don't have to be like super freaking nice and let people walk all over me, just the same way as I can still have employees and do these like, yes, kind of like capitalist systems, but it's like also the law. And in the long run, like I'm able to provide things for like my employees that contractors can't get.
Right.
Like stability. I'm working really hard to get like benefits, but
Mm-hmm.
so that's
So what I'm
in a
hearing, and
nutshell.
I love this, there are all the right reasons to build an employee-based team.
Hmm.
Um, and there are, of course, some people who don't want to be employees. And that's like kind of cool because then you've got a real evidence that they are contractors because they're doing work for other people
Hmm.
and all of that. And that the only thing I'd say is if somebody's fully dedicated to your company, they're working your procedures and policies, your process, not their
Hmm.
own. I
If they
love
have
the
an
fact that,
email address that's
yeah,
for
you
your
trained
company.
them. They've got the email address in your
Mhm,
company, guilty as charged on a couple, but they also have their businesses, so they don't
mhm,
want to be employees. Um, then then you really are dealing with a contractor. I mean,
mhm,
you really are dealing with an employee if you don't meet all those criteria. And historically, and I think you put this well when we first talked, we've been able to kind of dance around in the definitions and really say, oh, okay, I can justify this. But here's what happened last year with COVID. The government went a few
bing,
trillion
bing, bing.
dollars more in detail or
Mhm,
into debt. And when the government
mhm,
goes a few trillion dollars more into debt, they need to get money. And one of the ways they're going to get money is to start enforcing rules that already exist that have not been enforced. And one
mhm,
of the places they're going to make a fortune is on this. And there's a reason. If you get pegged for having not properly classified a contractor as an employee, you not only have to pay the employer tax you missed for however long, whether it's 1, 2, or 3 years, I don't know how far back they go, the employer tax you missed paying, which is 7.5% of what you've already paid them, but you also have to pay their self-employment tax, which is another 7.5, and their withholdings,
mhm.
which could be 15 to 30%. So
Yeah.
you could be paying an additional 45% of what you've already paid your contractor for a period of time as long as 2 to 3 years back. So
Mhm,
what I tell people is if you're interested in running the risk of paying your contractors 1.5 times what you're paying them now, along with penalties and fees, keep at it.
mhm,
But
mhm,
this is going to get real and somebody's going to be the first story. And no, it's not just going to be big businesses. They're not just going to
mm-mm.
start there because
No.
there are so many small businesses now that they can poke at to get this money. And it's
Mhm,
going to look like a water balloon to them of cash to start filling in the treasury.
mhm, mhm. Well,
So,
and too, there's just more awareness to our
oh yeah,
space since everyone's going remote.
right.
So,
Right. So it's important from a social aspect. It's important from a leadership aspect,
mhm,
and it's
mhm,
important from a financial aspect, which is, of course, what
mhm.
I'm going to point out. So,
Right, right. And I feel like we've just been like a lot of my peers have just been like, yeah, do whatever you want. It's online, but it's like, no, the laws actually still apply to us. And
yep.
just because we don't know about them isn't actually a
Oh,
good
it won't
enough
save you.
reason. No, from
That
the
won't save you.
IRS. No. And not to
If
like
you know
scare
enough to
people.
collect money from a client and pay somebody else, you're expected to understand some of the business basics.
Mhm.
And if the IRS doesn't excuse, I didn't know.
Mhm.
Um, they'll excuse, I didn't know, and then I learned and I changed it,
Yep.
but they won't excuse I didn't know.
Mhm.
So that's an important thing. Okay, well, I have sucked up a ton of your time, but there is something I want to share with people. So one of the things that we talked about is that you have a hiring checklist to help people out, and it's free. And
Yes.
this is the link, folks, where you can get it. So I'm going to actually also copy it in the chat, the link, so that we have that there. And this is really helpful because if you're starting to wrestle with the question of who should I hire, how should I hire, Where do I find them? All of those sorts of things. I've now dropped this in the chat so that people can copy and paste it. But there are always going to be a ton of questions around this. Every hot topic we've discussed. So if you guys want to drop comments, whether you're watching live, whether you're watching on replay, drop the questions in the comments, and I will make sure that we tag Megan and get them answered, because this is something that all of us with growing and scaling businesses are wrestling with. I know that I've kind of ticked off 2 to-dos today in my head, and one is to actually go out and engage an update in BIPOC DEI training for my organization, myself first, and my organization second, and then also to really take another look at anybody I've got as a contractor and make sure it still makes sense to be that way, both socially and from a financial standpoint. So thank you so much for taking all this time with us today.
Pam, thank you so much. This has been really a treat. I really appreciate being here.
I had so much fun. I learned so much, and I can't wait to go get the checklist.
Yes. Thank you, Pam.
All right. Take care. Everybody have a great rest of your hump day. We will be back with the next Snack and Learn tomorrow. Have a good one, everybody.
Bye.